Hey, this is Asad Walker, aka Ultra with Where Beats in Life. Today I'm in Graffiti Alley in Baltimore. This is an open alley. It's free and legal for people to come and test their public art making skills. If you go down the alley, you're going to see people that are just, experimenting, starting out, as well as the hardcore graffiti stuff. Baltimore has a rich history of public art. When I was a kid in the 70s, I used to ride the train through Baltimore, and it was one of the first places that I ever saw graffiti, even before I went to New York. Here we are, deep in Baltimore on Eastern Avenue. Behind me, this building is the Creative Alliance. It's part of Baltimore's investment into the performing and visual arts. Across the street, you can see a giant 2.5-story mural by Greg Deal, a really interesting street artist. Across the street, you can see the mosaics and even the bus stop. I'm sitting in the bus stop, and it's a giant piece of art. So here we are, last stop here in Baltimore today. The American Visionary Museum, one of my favorite spots to go. It kind of connects with everything else we've been doing today, where graffiti, street art, the Creative Alliance, all are kind of creating art, not really for monetary reasons, but for the love of the art.
Just want you to know where I'm coming from.
My artist name that I go by is Reed Beemore, but my friends just call me Jay. Right now, you are at the penthouse of Copycat, located in Baltimore, Maryland. It's also my home studio. I am a Baltimore transplant, originally from the county, but I moved here around 12 years ago. And I've been doing wire art for probably the past 10. The translation with kind of my history in graffiti and street art and the love for just writing on walls transitioned into me taking my sculptural work and putting it on traffic lights. What I find that I love about the city is its character, and it makes it way affordable for creatives and newfound artists to really get a good standing, able to provide for themselves off of their creative effort. And there's a huge community of, POC queer people who just love to express themselves. And I think that's one of the main reasons that will probably keep the city alive. Where my career and how my process has been is I started off doing artwork in public school for as long as I knew. And then I went out on a whim to try to get accepted to MICA, got accepted into an environmental design program, which is fancy words for just saying how to do product and spatial design, architecture and making stuff. And then when I found out after getting there, how kind of isolating design work could be, seemingly not having a tangible process and having all of your hypothetical designs being on a computer, I really wanted to find something that was inherently me and something that that I could physically give towards my community other than just my skill set. It came from a lot of boredom. It came from a lot of reworking some weird PTSD, emotional exhaustion. And then how I got here, the extension of my art is almost all the mosaic of past terrible experiences and good experiences led me to where I am now. Wire is an amazing medium for product design, in a quick fix, fixing a bike, fixing friends' camera stuff, hanging up pictures. Wire as a medium has always found itself to me being some of the most useful tool and material that I could just carry in my pocket and fix situations because I'm a problem solver. How that translated into everything else was, again, the stagnation of feeling like I didn't have a voice and having a medium but not knowing the correct way in order to display it for the public. So talking to a bunch of graffiti homies and people who I used to play games with and party, they just told me that next evolution was putting it outside somehow. Whenever I go out into existing cities, sometimes I don't have a piece that I could bring from a studio over to a thing, so I just spend a few hours sitting on a bench making the piece on site, talking to people, getting like kind of like a feel of how the area is before I even go and install. And you know, fortunate for me, sometimes like I'm able to just do my stuff out in broad daylight, you know? Other times I have to go out at 2 a.m. just because traffic's heavy and I don't want to get hit or anything like that. But it's always a back and forth, and how I always work my process was either going this, just the flexibility of it, you know? Like, of course I have my studio so I could be professional and put that hat on to create, but sometimes it doesn't allot for that. And you know, that's one of the things that I had to take as being someone who's different, doing the medium different for street art, and really build that into a graffiti-esque practice. Street art refers to art on the street. Where I take some of my graffiti aspects comes from me just wanting to get up and get out there and get my name out there and like figure out ways to hit the biggest spots and, you know, really just enunciate my existence. Where I feel like street art in the terms is way more context-based. People look at street art and like the context in which you put it with a more focused lens. I think like the fortunate fact for me, especially like during this pandemic and even before that, is I never really had to heavily rely on galleries in order to make a living, you know. I do all my stuff through social media. You know, I'm very fortunate that in the time that we have, you can truly brand market yourself without the help of someone who's in that industry, you know. But the hardest part about being an artist these days is you also have to be your own PR person. You also have to be like your own marketing and branding, and like it gets a little tough. But as long as you like figure out what in your process works for you, breaking it down into bite-sized pieces and just kind of attacking each one of those like a bit at a time, whittling it down, you know? What I would tell my 17-year-old self is all the stuff that I learned in nursery rhymes way back in the day that I just really fully didn't amount or like kind of give heed to until I was really in the thick of it. Turtle wins the race, you know? You don't have to constantly think that every single piece that you're putting out is gonna hit it big or is gonna be on some trend, because when it comes down to it, a career is something that you look back on, you know? When you're in it, you're making pieces and you're constantly getting frustrated and you're constantly getting over these battles, and it doesn't have to be based on how trendy or whatever likes that you get from your peers. As long as you know that your art is good and you keep going throughout a few years doing that, like, hell yeah, you're gonna get the clientele and you're gonna get business practices and fall and pick yourself up to find these things that work for you. Because as many books as there are about how to do a good business art practice, you're not gonna figure that out until you actually jump into it yourself and give yourself the years of experience of figuring out who you like to work with, the flavors, and like what type of moralities that your art actually stands for. Anybody who's 17 going onto that, this is a learning period. Like you gotta, it's a trial by fire, trial and error, you know? Figure out things that work for you. Like really don't get too down on yourself that like you're falling out or falling in with things, because it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter at the end. As long as like you find that process that makes you happy, whatever that is, you don't gotta rely on anybody else to make it whatever your version of success is.